Hello, I'm Casey Aiken. This is 21 This Week. Coming up next, while the Montgomery County delegation wants to block President Trump's immigration policies, the county executive offers a contrasting view. The General Assembly continues to avoid the Maryland public pension reality. Governor Hogan opposes the expansion of powers for Attorney General Frosch, and county planners like hip and cool rooftop decks, but reject a Potomac banquet hall. Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the past president of Progressive Maryland, Elbridge James, political strategist Susan Heltemes, and the secretary of the Maryland Republican Party, Mark Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. And welcome back. Reaction to the executive orders issued by President Donald Trump that change and in some instances reverse the immigration policies of former President Barack Obama has risen dramatically. Nationwide, state and local governments are proposing legislation to address the change in policy. Here in Maryland, the state legislature is considering a bill that would prohibit state and local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. Elbridge, since the thrust of President Trump's immigration policies is to target illegal immigrants who have a criminal record, what do you say to those who argue that the proponents of these bills are disregarding public safety while protecting criminals?
It was implemented totally off base, with no concept as to, or no forethought as to how to implement it correctly so they could have a greater support by those that needed to have support. We have state after state saying the fact that this is going to disrupt businesses, it's going to disrupt families, it's going to disrupt a whole community life. And in fact, now he's going after folks that have a speeding ticket. It's been proven.
That's just nonsense.
They are.
That is a fact.
They are. People have been deported already.
Oh, Susan.
But here's the other point.
The level of
it has been
nonsense
shown
that's coming
the fact
out
that
is
it's 1 in
incredible.
a billion that you're going to get attacked and killed. 1 in a billion the opportunities and chances you're going to get attacked and killed by an illegal immigrant. But yet,
tell that to that young girl in Silver Spring who just got killed in Fairfax County by gang members.
Wait a minute.
1 in a billion? Come on.
I've had greater instances and no greater instances between racial disparities and attacks. But yeah, you don't hear us talk about rounding up these people and that nature.
Look, the Baltimore Sun printed out a 4-page article about the impact of this, and the first item was that the targets are people who have committed criminal activity, not speeding tickets, not civil violation, but criminal activity.
But so there is no rhyme or
that has changed.
That has changed. That's what we're saying.
And you can be picked up even now if you're in the room with someone.
Let's be clear, we're talking about enforcing the law as the law is on the books,
written.
Prioritizing people who have criminal histories. Now sometimes, while the sweeps are going on, while arrests are being made, other people will be picked up.
That's my point.
But wait a minute, we're losing track. The question is whether or not what the General Assembly is doing is the correct thing. Susan, our county executive, offered a contrasting view when he said there could be collateral consequences from passing these types of laws.
Well,
what are those consequences?
Well, he based his statement on what the county attorney, Mark Hansen, said. Obviously, off the top, we could lose federal funds, and he's thinking about Prince George's and the FBI. There are also, like, open, under Maryland law, open announcements of when people leave the jail. This, you have to do that legally in the state of Maryland. That would be against this. Also, in terms of cooperation, there are times when we want to give fingerprints to the FBI and get them back, and this would annul it. So the thing, though, that is most disconcerting about this issue, though, is that according to what I've read, that the new document will say that everybody is going to be dumped in Mexico. And Mexico this week is just beginning to seethe. They don't want people from El Salvador and Honduras, and the U.S. government has says, you're going to get them. And that is something to watch in the days ahead.
Well, we don't even know if that's correct.
It is the truth.
No, Susan, it hasn't even been released yet. So how can you say it's the truth? Mark.
Let's talk about the unintended consequences here in Montgomery County. What this prohibition would stop is the ability of the Montgomery County Police Department, when they're encountering gang activity in the school system where there's recruiting going on, from sharing information with ICE about those gang members. That's putting people in Montgomery County at risk. The police ought to have the discretion. We're not saying that they are the ones who are going to be doing rounding up, but we're talking about sharing of information in some very dangerous situations.
The argument is the fact is that the concept is great, the bill is flawed. And in fact,
it's not a bill. It's simply an implementation of the actual law.
No, we're talking about.
I'm sorry. The Maryland law. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right.
It is flawed, and in fact, it needs to be reviewed, and then amendments have to be put in place. And until that happens, I agree with Ike Lake in terms of the unintended consequences of that.
And Virginia has already said, hey, they want to do this, we should get the FBI. So it will be interesting to see what comes of it. But I think that you talk about a flawed law, not only the dumping in Mexico, but they
Susan,
are not.
You're
are
going
not,
off topic
no.
again, and we have to wrap it up. So I'm cutting you off. All right, our next topic. Governor Larry Hogan has made the first effort to address the more than $19 billion long-term shortfall in the retirement program for state workers and teachers by instituting an optional 401k-style retirement program for new state workers. Critics like the Baltimore Sun's columnist Barry Roscover think that this plan is a dodge to the real problem because it would draw new workers out of the retirement system and could make the problem worse for thousands of state employees in the future. Susan, it may not be a perfect plan, but doesn't the governor and the legislature have to make a first cut to solve this unfunded liability?
Well, that's where the bind comes, because Governor Hogan created this legislation and never consulted with anyone in the state. He didn't consult with the legislatures.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Well, you said they have to work together. You said that. I'm using your words, Casey. He didn't do that.
But isn't this a first cut? Is it because the legislature has ignored their responsibilities up till now?
Hogan didn't go along with his responsibilities either, because there should have been $50 million in the budget to help fill this gap. It wasn't there. It is a very tricky issue, and in terms of if they do put future employees in other systems, there won't be as much coming into the state coffers, and it is a big pickle, and I think it's something that the legislature, the governor, and perhaps the citizens panel should work out the details with people who know what they're doing.
Mark, is it really that complicated, or can they just stop spending so damn much money
they could stop
and making promises to the state employees?
Some of the solutions or some of the proposals that people have had right now, the state is paying a disproportionately high percentage of fees for investment. They could do much better if they cut back and use more passive investing, and frankly, their returns would go up too. Wouldn't solve the whole issue, but this is an issue that over a number of years the Maryland Public Policy Institute has been championing. The math is wrong actuarially about new employees and output, because basically you would end up dropping the liability with the new employees. What the governor proposed is something that in the private sector is the norm overwhelmingly, where you have defined contributions plans as opposed to these defined benefit. It's hardly unusual. It's certainly a starting point for him to talk about, and it's a good way of addressing this issue into the future.
But he should have worked
But
with
he's looking
others.
at this like the state of Maryland is a small company or medium company. It is the largest employer in the state. And in fact, this problem, as Casey, you had mentioned, who started this problem? This problem started in the 1990s, around 98, when in fact the legislature and the governor at the time decided that we were going to give this tax break and overextended that, and we have not recovered from that. One of the consequences of that tax break when you went from 5% to 4.5%. It should have been 4 3/4, but it went to 4.5%. And in fact, that loss of revenue started a slow trickle effect that caused a Great Depression, recession that we've had, and it has unintended consequences also on not being able to fund.
But they haven't addressed it in 20 years?
No, they haven't, because no one's wanted to touch it. Just like now, no one wants to touch it.
We've had a couple of balanced budgets in the last 20 years.
We had a couple of balanced budgets, but they have not addressed the situation with the pensions. Like they've taken money from the transit fund and other areas to support funding.
And sunny day
But the
funds.
returns, let's come back, the returns on investment for pension funds in general have declined relative to the actuarial assumptions that they had. That's a function of the market. That had nothing to do with the 1990s tax cut.
It does and it doesn't. And when I say it does, because in fact, you have people who are allowed now to, as Casey said, hide this problem until we get to a point where you have $19 billion in unfunded mandate here that has to be addressed. And rather than bring out the principals, the governor, the legislature, and the board that manages this fund, and put them in a room with a gun and tell them don't come out until you solve this situation, we're going to continue to have this ball bounce back and forth.
And you have to do it collegially and cooperatively. The governor isn't going to get, anything done.
The government
Eldridge is trying to appeal to me with a Second Amendment argument.
I just want you to know that Elbridge was very clever in describing the problem. He didn't identify the governor, which I believe was Paris Glendenning.
I'm not arguing about bad government now. I'm not arguing, but we've had plenty of bad government in the...
You're going to have the last word, Elbridge, because I am arguing about bad government. When we come back from this short break, Governor Hogan opposes the expansion of powers for the Attorney General, and county planners like hip and cool rooftop decks. But they don't like a Potomac banquet hall? What's up with that? Stay tuned. And welcome back. The reflexive anger directed at President Donald Trump extended to both houses of the General Assembly as the legislature took up a resolution that would empower the Attorney General to sue the federal government without the permission of the Maryland governor. Lost in the vitriol of the moment was the fundamental question of who does the Attorney General represent and whom does he report to? Mark, Governor Hogan was visibly angry over this resolution. Why such consternation?
Well, part of the constitutional role for the Attorney General is to serve as the lawyer, the counsel for the governor. And so this sets up a division between them and allows for the Attorney General to freelance in completely different directions. There's this push and pull inherent in the Attorney General's role, and traditionally in Maryland we've come down on the side that the Attorney General is primarily a role as a representative for the governor.
So many other attorney generals have this authority, so why should Maryland be any different?
Actually 41, now there's 42 governors. So obviously the vast majority of the states think this is important. And it is important when you think about what the attorney generals of Minnesota and Washington did in holding up the immigration edict, for lack of a better word, that Trump put upon this country. So he's our governor too. He isn't just the governor's he is he's our attorney.
You're talking about the Attorney General.
Yes, Frosh. Frosh is our attorney as well as the governor's. And it's the right thing to do.
And he's elected by the people.
That's right.
He's not appointed by the governor. He's elected by the people to represent the people.
The issue is whether or not he should get permission from the governor first before he sues the federal government. We're a system of federalism and not independent. Before you sue the federal government, the governor of the state should be cleared by what your action is going to be.
Well, but he hasn't.
We're not talking about a private company that may have committed a tort. We're talking about challenging the federal government.
And there are complexities when an attorney general goes into a lawsuit, when there's a settlement, when there's a representation of the views. where the Attorney General can effectively
I
bind,
think
bind state policy in ways that would be inappropriate.
It's important, though, I think, in the months and years ahead, perhaps, especially since we're on the Chesapeake Bay and with federal environmental laws expected to change, there was a concern on the part of the legislature that we speak up and make certain that, you know, we take care of our bay, which is very important to our state, and also perhaps immigration. And I will tell you that if it came down to the people versus Larry Hogan, the people of Maryland would be behind those two issues.
Susan, if there was a Republican Attorney General and Democratic governor, would you be saying the same thing?
If the issues were right, yeah. And because he would...
If the issues were right.
Yeah, the issues are never right. Elbridge, aren't you worried that this could set a dangerous precedent, and in the wrong hands, you could have an Attorney General doing things that are just not in the state's best interest, and there's no check and balance on him?
If I'm correct, in Virginia, you had a similar situation where the governor wanted one thing, but the Attorney General pushed for and challenged the Obama administration. And it wasn't when the governor could not stop it. Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, the Attorney General.
Did you think that was a good? Did you think that was a good idea?
It's
it was
democracy.
Ken Cuccinelli that you're talking about.
Yes.
Ken Cuccinelli sued. Did you think that was appropriate?
It wasn't my business. It was the people of Virginia who decided it.
Uh-huh.
And the people of Virginia did not in fact complain about him doing it. So I think the people of Maryland.
Well, they must have, because they didn't elect Cuccinelli to be governor when he ran 2 years later.
Another point. The people of that jurisdiction will decide whether you're doing a good job or not a good job.
And I will tell you,
That's
in
check
this
and
state,
balances.
if Brian Frosch does something that the voters won't like,
Right.
trust me, there will be another Democrat or two or
and-
12
and
ready
the
to run
good-
against
so much
him.
grandstanding from these politicians. I mean, you look at the Attorney General of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. They are constantly doing grandstanding exhibitions to get themselves notoriety.
I will tell you that
this is
Brian
a
Frosch,
terrible idea.
Do you know,
but 42 states haven't.
but do you know what AG stands for? Aspiring governor.
Not
Mark,
in this state.
You're going to have the last word on that, because we're going to go on to our next topic, which is kind of fun in a lot of ways. Oftentimes, zoning matters seem trivial in nature. And at other times, there are loud reactions to the changes in neighborhoods that threaten the status quo. This week, citizens opposed to the massive development in the Westbard neighborhood pushed back on the trendy design plans that have rooftop decks on the upscale townhouses. And in another action, the planning board turned down a proposal from the owners of Old Anglers Inn, which would have allowed the restaurant to build a banquet hall and 4 overnight guests for rooms after citizens complained. Elbridge, why are residents so threatened by new development?
I'm at home. I want to have peace and quiet. I'm in my bedroom. I'm in a townhouse, and you're going to tell me I had to put up with some yo-yo that's going to be on this rooftop who may not have constructed it properly, and I have to hear all that noise.
No, the rooftop deck is constructed by the builder. What?
Not always. When
Not the
you go
roof.
down,
If it's the rooftop, yeah, I think it would be. You're thinking of one off your back.
No, I'm thinking about the rooftop, because once you get down this road, from my point of view, I can see, I'm in the townhouse, and I can see them petitioning, well, in this place they have rooftop decks, why can't we have them here?
Well, what's different than having somebody have a loud party in their backyard? There's no difference, is there?
Yeah, there is. There's
proximity,
three floors versus right above
Mark,
your head.
Now you're a trendy guy.
Right.
I know you would like to have a rooftop deck so you could party hardy.
You know, the neighbors have been complaining about my parties.
About Robin.
And Robin,
about
too.
Robin.
For such a long time that we had to move, yeah.
Yeah. So but seriously, why is there a pushback? This just seems to be a new design trend that could disappear 10 years from now.
Well, I think it's an amenity that people clearly want now. If they don't have much of a backyard, the roof deck creates a kind of outdoor space, and particularly, frankly, with global warming and warm Februarys, people want to be outside in February.
What's interesting about these places, these are high-end establishments. And when I'm in a townhouse also, We may not have as much space as you do living in Potomac with the big backyard. We have our roof. We don't have big backyards to have parties. And I'll tell you, in my neighborhood, my neighbors just have regular decks. I have never had to complain once. And I think this is much ado about nothing. Get over it. As we move forward, we know that land is becoming more and more precious in this county. There will be far more townhouses in the future.
Speaking of which, why do we have such a big ag reserve? Why don't we just open up the ag reserve so we can build more housing and have workforce development and have houses that people can afford,
because
and they can
afford
to live in this county.
That we wanted to have clean air. And that ag reserve is very important for clean air in this area.
We can plant some trees, but of course they would put off carbon dioxide, and then we'd all go to hell, wouldn't we? Susan, on the other issue about Old Anglers Inn, I think it was the C&O Canal Association opposed the development of a banquet hall for this restaurant and is keeping it from being built. The restaurateur needs to be able to compete with other venues. They need to be able to build something that people can have a wedding, a bar mitzvah, something fun at your birthday party.
Yeah, well, I don't do that anymore. I think part of it's a very historic, quaint neighborhood along the C&O Canal. I think there is concern about noise. And
noise? There's nothing there.
I know.
Have you ever been there?
Yes, and
they're at a bend in the road. There's nothing there.
I know we want to keep it bucolic and with those trees emitting oxygen for the air. I don't know why they're upset, except that, you know, it's change and there'll be more traffic and there'll be more parking and you get 160 people there. There'll be no more noise.
Right across the river, not directly across, is the Trump National Golf Course. So the Old Angler Inn has to be able to compete with the Trump National Golf Course. And as I recall, I think they had to clear cut a whole bunch of trees. There's a little bit of controversy.
No, Dan Snyder did
Well,
that.
that was another one, yeah. But Maryland, here's an example where Maryland is less competitive with Virginia.
Look, I think Mark is entirely right. I mean, you look at the development.
Isn't that a cute story?
You look at the development in this county, and you wonder why people think Montgomery County is not business friendly. I mean, this is a great example. You're not allowing people to maximize their property and to compete with others. You know, restaurants is the toughest business in the retail world, and you need to be able to compete. And having a banquet hall is a big boon to that business. I have the last word. Stay tuned for parting shots.
Restaurants seem to be
Now with parting shots, Susan Heltemes.
As a private citizen, Donald Trump used to complain in his tweets about the audacity of Barack Obama going out and golfing and spending money, our taxpayer money, to go golfing. Well, since he has been elected president, or actually since he's been inaugurated, he has played 6 times already, although there hasn't been forthright coming from his staff, because they're hiding the fact he's golfing, but his partners are letting it go. So he has golfed 6 times already. In total, President Obama spent $97 million on security. Donald Trump has already spent $10 million. The bottom line is you need to project your taxes because God knows you're spending enough of our tax dollars.
Elbridge.
My parting shot has to go to Montgomery County Police and Community Services with our regard to the issue of Black Lives Matter, which is still on some people's minds. They're reaching out to the community to work with youth so that they have a complete community, police, and youth relationship to encourage our youth, in fact, to not be afraid of the police, and also have our police officers not to be afraid of the community.
Thank you, Elbridge. Mark.
2 bad bills bit the dust in Annapolis this week. One was the staggered term proposal, a constitutional amendment to stagger the terms of the county council or allow the county council to do it. Another was the liquor authority proposal that was by the county executive But we've got another one that still has to get addressed, which was the bill that was passed last year, the roadkill bill that skewed the transportation investment in Maryland towards mass transit.
Thank you, Mark. I have to say, I love the roadkill bill because that was the best Halloween costume I ever had. I went to a party where I was dressed like a skunk with all red blood all over me. It was the best Halloween costume I ever had in my life. And Susan, guess what I'm doing this weekend, Susan?
Golfing.
I'm golfing this weekend.
But raining early tomorrow
The president's
morning.
not going to be playing with me, but I'm going to be golfing. So for 21 this week, I want to thank the panel for being here tonight. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.
You know what?